Omar posts this insane letter saying that America needs to bring democracy to El Salvador.
Oh, that's right. You do politics, don't you, Graham?
Yes.
Graham does politics like Lee Camp. You know, it's not enough to be funny. He's got to be like, you know, politically aware. Okay, Graham. So, yeah, who is this? It's a congresswoman, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. And she wrote a letter. Tell the people what's going on, Graham. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm hijacking your show again.
So this is she wrote this on January 30th. Dear Secretary Blinken. Well, already you're writing a letter to Secretary Blinken, who is a full-grade jackass. We're writing to express our significant concerns regarding democratic backsliding and an increase in reports of human rights violations in El Salvador. So let's, out of the gate, the United States has a problem with human rights violations. How many human rights does the United States violate just before breakfast every day?
Well, the current calculations are 47. It's 47, depending on the states. That's the average across all 50 states. Some states are higher, some states are lower, but it's a 47 per state human rights abuse violations. Obviously, San Francisco, it's 5,000 before breakfast. And then in Wyoming, because actually nobody lives there, it's closer to 0. It's just cows. You know, there's nobody actually inhabitants of
cow
Wyoming.
Violations.
But it averages out to whatever number I said 30 seconds ago, but I've already forgotten because I'm so zipped on caffeine. But nevertheless, she is calling out the human rights violations in her view. And it's ironic, as you are pointing out, because in the U.S. is going through a human rights debacle. They're going through a period where human rights have been tossed out the window. And so much of what people associate with the United States, they now associate with El Salvador. The economic freedom, the pursuit of happiness, the ability to have your own private property. Of course, Bitcoin is unconfiscatable private property, but in the U.S. they have eminent domain. They have seizures by the FBI. They have taxes that are raging in states that can't afford to pay all these programs. That's a form of theft. That's property theft when you just keep raising taxes.
I lost my home to foreclosure in 2010 because of the housing crisis, which in research after that happened, the aftermath of it, I read, there was a book called Chain of Title that Dave Dane wrote. There was also a documentary called Inside Job, and I was like, oh, this was a scam to steal 6 million people's homes. So they can just flat out, just the government can come and just take it, or they can give Wall Street money to do it. So
right.
Like that was the thing. Bush and Obama gave $1.5 trillion that was supposed to be bailout money, and the only people who got bailed out were the, as you call them, the kleptocrats on Wall Street.
Kleptocrats and cantillionaires.
Yeah.
Right. They do asset seizure. They confiscate people's wealth. They engage in all types of different ways to essentially create neo-feudalism. That's something else I talk about. So the absolute folks who are closest to the money printers, the cantillionaires, are getting fabulously wealthy. They're becoming essentially monarchs, and everyone else is becoming a serf class. It's a wealth and income disparity is going into neo-feudal type levels. And in El Salvador, it's the opposite in terms of encouraging economic freedom. You have unconfiscatable wealth with Bitcoin. You have now a huge peace dividend. So when President Bukele locked up 70,000 gangsters and put them in jail, that means that the $6 billion a year that they were extorting from the population goes into the pockets of the population. And this is a $28 billion economy. They just got a $6 billion peace division, number one. Number
That's
two.
That's like a 30% pay raise, in essence.
Exactly. They just lowered energy costs by 10%. By efficiently reorganizing the national grid. They are got tourism's up over 100%, bringing a lot of wealth to tourists. Foreign direct investment up billions of dollars. So this is all the peace dividend, which is tied into Bitcoin and the vision of President Bukele, who essentially I call it Bukeleonomics, where he is still running a government, but the point of this government is to be as minimalistic in size as possible. But to do public works like the new library, which you've seen in the metropolitan downtown district,
is stunning.
Stunning library.
I've seen just this, I want to say, like from when I came here June of last year.
Yeah.
When I came here in June of last year, El Zonte, which is nicknamed Bitcoin Beach, all dirt roads. When I came back in November, half of the roads are being paved, the other half are on the process of being paved. Just in, what is that, 4 months?
Yeah. multiply that times every village and hamlet and city in the country of El Salvador. All the infrastructure is being redone, the waterworks are being done, roads are being done, the road to what will become Bitcoin City is being done, and the public infrastructure, the public domain, like the public library and these types of projects, all the major towns now, when they have, let's say, a fountain in the middle of the square, they're all being redone and done spectacularly well and beautifully done. Like the library, everyone's knows the library and they see the library, it's quite beautiful, but that's being repeated all over the country in city squares. People are for the first time hanging out when they could not go outside after dark.
That's a great point. Again, this is what, and I'm going to get more into why this letter is so maddening, because everyone that's like, oh, El Salvador is dangerous, I go, have you been there? No. Then shut up. It's like the idiots are like, Bitcoin's a scam. Have you read the white paper? What's that? You don't know what you're talking about then. If you've come here and researched it and you've come to different conclusions, then I'll maybe listen to your argument. But you don't know what you're talking about. So again, Sandy waves that we were in downtown San Salvador when I was here for the first time, around this big fountain square, and I'm like, is it okay to pull up my phone? And I'm taking photos, and she goes, yes. She goes, just so you know, 2 years ago, that had been ripped out of your hand. Like, no one would come to downtown San Salvador at night, and now there's this renaissance. Conversely, I was in Hawaii for 2 years during the pandemic. I moved back to LA. I live at the beach in Santa Monica. Crime is up. There's homeless encampments. I literally saw a homeless guy taking a shit on the street in front of my yoga studio. I mean, I shit next to him. I didn't want him to feel bad.
It's rare to see Joe Biden in the public like that. That was quite a treat, wasn't it?
I was like, hey, build back better, bro. And I fist bumped him. It was fantastic. I was like, thanks, Joe. I feel so much better. And then he forgot where he was.
Yeah.
And then he just sniffed a little kid's hair, and then he wandered away. It was great. But I'm like, I've seen, in the 20-some years I've lived in Los Angeles, I've seen the quality of life get worse. I know what the rents were when I have a studio apartment, and it's a nice building, but I could live in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house with a pool and a hot tub 10 minutes from the beach here. And the audacity, the American arrogance of like, we're going to give you democracy, and American democracy, we all know, is just, you're getting fisted. It's just like...
What kind of show is this? Holy God. You know, Graham, things have taken a turn in unusual...
I punched in the mouth. We can tone it down a little bit.
No, I get it. The fact is that the human rights of 6.5 or 7 million Salvadorans come first. Those human rights are being protected. The first job of government is to protect the citizens. Okay, so the 7 million Salvadorans who live here, they're having their security, and they're protected by the government that they pay taxes to, and the murder rate's gone down to almost zero. It's trending toward zero. In the United States, they are not protecting their citizens. So the human rights of the citizens in the United States are not being protected, and that's provable and demonstrable.
I can prove it in LA. Again, right? I'll just give you more concrete evidence. They repealed this cash bail law in Los Angeles, LA County.
Right.
So all of these guys are just on the streets that they can't hold. The LA Police Department is not responding to as many 911 calls because they want to keep the stats down. Because if they respond to all of them, then it's going to show the crime rates up. So they're just literally not picking up the phone to say, oh, no, crime's not on the increase.
Right.
So people are crimes are happening, they're calling 911, and nothing is happening.
Right, because, Graham, it gets back to the money. And so what you just described there is the police department, in order to qualify for some bonus based on some statistical feedback on arrests, they need to game the system and report false numbers to get the bonus, which will help them offset the fact that the price of everything is going up because the feds keep printing a lot of this fiat money and causing inflation. So inflation causes people to be, the motivations become warped and corrupt, and it's endemic. And everybody who lives in that society is looking to cut and to game the system, and all this does is it degrades the system and the efficiency of the system and the integrity of the system, so that the government has to print more and more money, which creates more and more inflation, which creates a greater incentive to be crooked, to be corrupt. So now this is spreading into all corners of American society and industry. In the medical and pharmaceutical industry, I think it's pretty clear from the COVID experience that this is an incredibly corrupt industry, as corrupt as Wall Street is. Wall Street is obviously very corrupt. The major media outlets are obviously very corrupt. There's no institution, no part of the economy in the United States that's not, you can't analyze and say that this has all the telltale signs of being massively corrupt. And that's a human rights violation, because you're living in a country where you're being where you're essentially being victimized by an organized criminal syndicate that runs the government. It's beyond fascism. Fascism at least has an ethos where you're combining corporations and government. But in the United States system, it's pure mafia economics. It's a mob mentality. It's a mob. It's a mafia.
I grew up in Chicago. This is like, I knew mob guys. Like, honestly, Max, I'd rather have like the Italian mob. I'd rather deal with them, because at least there was some set of rules. The government is just like, we take whatever we want. The rules are always changing. And like you said, it breeds this selfishness to get these kickbacks. It's like, well, I have to screw you over so that I get more money or whatever. And again,
yeah, it's like Les Miserables. The guy goes and has to steal a loaf of bread to feed his child. And he has to convert to crime, and it's during a period of feudalism and harsh reality. And this is what's happening in the U.S. People are forced to commit crimes to survive, to feed their children. And of course, this feeds the prison industrial complex, if you want to call it that. Private prisons, and there's a lot of money in that. That's totally corrupt as well. And so these are all human rights violations. And so for this Congresswoman to suggest that the human rights violations that we should be looking at are in El Salvador is laughably wrong. In fact, the human rights for Salvadorans are increasing at warp speed by the minute, every hour. If you define human rights as safe have a safe life free from violent crime, to have access to education, which obviously the president just built a library. I mean, he understands with human rights. This is free access. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There's a line to get in, 2 hours. That's access to free education, everything that comes with that. Transportation, education, health, all the health infrastructure and health is being improved. They have something called Chivo Pets, actually, which is kind of a novelty, but you can bring your pet into the hospital, and if you pay in Bitcoin, it's only 50 cents a visit for your pet. That was launched a couple of years ago. And so the president is combining what you want from a government, which is to take advantage of the economies of scale. People like Bernie Sanders, for example, and others of that side of the political aisle are correct in that the government should be involved in healthcare due to the economies of scale, the single buyer, single purchaser,
single payer healthcare,
single payer health. There's a logic to that, It works in the military. The military has a single buyer of ammunition, and they get a price based on the fact that they're going to buy a few trillion rounds, right? This can be applied to healthcare in the United States. I think that there is a case to be made for government in that way, as minimalistically to improve human rights.
That's a great point. And this is the thing why I became a proponent. Bernie called it in 2020, reframed it to Medicare for all. So as it was explained to me what Medicare is, which exists in America, if you're 65 and older, you go to the doctor, the doctor says the procedure's $2,500, the government says, no, we're gonna pay you $700, which is why the healthcare industry is so against it. So it's not telling you have to go to this doctor, it's just billing. And the problem I have with the United States, we're the richest country in the history of the world, the number one cause of bankruptcy is medical debt. 50 to 60,000 people a year die in America because they're denied healthcare because they don't have health insurance. They're just turned away at the door. Again, that's not making American citizens' lives better. My personal safety through the healthcare industry, or the Sackler family just getting everybody hooked on opioids and lying about that. The audacity to then say in this letter that it's so dangerous down here. First of all, deal with your own backyard. I mean, these American politicians. And I remember when Omar and the squad got elected, and I was I'm a big progressive lefty, obviously. but I don't like the Democratic Party. Yeah, I know. I know. I'm one of the few lefties in the Bitcoin space. It's but when I heard they were elected, like, oh, they're going to fight the Democratic Party. No, they're not. They're just lockstep with the corruption of the Democratic Party. The two parties are so corrupt. It's just how do you want to get screwed over? Do you want a shit sandwich that's wrapped in an American flag, or do you want a shit sandwich that's wrapped in a rainbow flag? That's my opinion of the two-party system. And the audacity of them saying, well, we got to, first of all, obviously Omar has no sense of history of this country. America came down here to help in the 80s, and we helped foster a horrific civil war. Like, that's America's democracy. I mean, we could go on.
MS-13 came from LA.
Yes, it came from LA.
Yeah.
And when I posted, last night when I was sitting on the plane calling out Omar on Twitter,
Yeah.
somebody said, oh, they're just arresting people with tattoos. I said, well, let's clarify that. To get a tattoo, to earn a tattoo on MS-13, you had to kill or rape. So anybody with a tattoo is not some innocent kid that just who wanted to join. No, you had to commit a horrible act. So arresting someone with these tattoos that the government and the cops know, you have this tattoo, we know you've done something awful, that's fine by me. And again, fix all of these problems. You're a congresswoman.